based on what you know that's public, what is your theory? I mean, do you think this was a kidnapping?
Oh, I think something went very wrong inside the house, and that either she wasn't alive when something happened because there was blood. I mean, they have released that, and that there was blood also outside. So it isn't that something could have happened, but not have caused her demise. But because she at least gets out. So you've got some droplets. Again, we don't even know how much you have to analyze. And then why does it stop? Where does it go? Those kinds of things. Does it go into a car? Does it follow a path? Does it, those kinds of things? It's just like it vanished. She just vanished.
Something went very wrong inside that house. That is not speculation. That is not a theory thrown out to fill airtime. Those are the words of Dr. Ann Burgess, one of the original architects of criminal profiling, the real-life inspiration behind the Netflix series Mindhunter. A woman who spent decades inside the FBI's behavioral science unit, helping investigators understand the minds behind the most disturbing crimes in American history. And when she looks at the Nancy Guthrie case, she does not see what most people see. She does not see a kidnapping for money. She does not see a random act of opportunity. She does not see a confused or impulsive offender who stumbled into something they did not plan. She sees something calculated, something personal, something that may have been in motion for years, maybe even decades before the night of February 1st Street. She sees revenge. And she sees something even more disturbing than that. She raises the possibility that Nancy Guthrie was never the true target at all, that she may have been taken not for who she is, but for who she is connected to, that somewhere out there, someone is watching the news coverage, following every update, monitoring every unanswered question, and feeling exactly what they intended. 72 days, no arrest, no named suspect, no answer. And one of the most accomplished profilers in FBI history sitting across from investigative journalist Brian Entin, pointing not toward randomness, not toward opportunism, but toward something deeply, deliberately, personally planned. No forced entry, blood inside the home and outside. A pacemaker that recorded 41 minutes of distress and then went silent. A phone left on the kitchen counter, a 1:44 a.m. call whose number has been known since day one. And a motive that, according to Dr. Burgess, may not be in the present at all. It may be buried in the past, years back, maybe a decade or more. Stay with me all the way through, because what Dr. Ann Burgess says in this conversation does not just reframe this case. It reframes everything about how we have been thinking about it. Family. Before I walk you through every insight from this conversation, before I take you through what one of the FBI's greatest profilers says about how this crime was committed, why it was committed, who could have committed it, and what will ultimately break it open, we stop because Nancy Guthrie is not a case study. She is not a profile to be analyzed from a safe distance. She is an 84-year-old mother and grandmother who spent the last known normal evening of her life at her daughter Annie's house. Dinner. A game. Tommaso drove her home. Her garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. She was inside. She was alone. And then, at 1:44 in the morning, a call came in on her private cell phone from someone who had her number. 3 minutes later, a masked figure appeared at her doorbell camera and disabled it. 41 minutes of documented cardiac distress in her pacemaker data. And then silence. 72 days later, no arrest, no confirmed answer, no peace for the people who love her. Nancy deserves to come home. Everything in this video comes from verified public reporting, confirmed law enforcement statements, and the direct analysis of Dr. Ann Burgess, one of the most credentialed criminal profilers in the history of American law enforcement. Let's pray. Lord, for Nancy, for Savannah, for Annie, for every member of this family that has been carrying 72 days of silence, for the investigators working this case, for the profilers who are trying to understand the mind behind it, for the witnesses who know something and have not yet found the courage to speak, for truth, for justice, for Nancy's return. Amen. Type Amen for Nancy. Where are you watching from? Country and city. Drop it below. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because when this case breaks, you want to be in this room. Let's begin. When Brian Entin arrived in Tucson at the beginning of this investigation, he expected what most seasoned reporters expect in a missing person case. A timeline, a developing suspect pool, a theory that begins to take shape within days. He got none of that. Days turned into weeks. Weeks stretched toward 2 months. And the deeper he dug, the stranger the case became. Because this was not just a disappearance. It was a disappearance that defied the rules. Oh, in most abduction cases, there are patterns investigators rely on. Forced entry at the point of access, signs of a struggle, furniture overturned, glass broken, evidence of resistance at the threshold, witnesses who noticed something out of place, a trail that, even when faint, points somewhere. Here, there was none of that. No broken door, no shattered window. No evidence that someone forced their way inside. No alarm that brought neighbors running. No chaos at the entrance. What there was quiet. Controlled. Still. A home that, from the outside, showed no sign that anything had happened at all. And that is where Dr. Burgess planted her first flag. Because when a home shows no signs of forced entry, the number of ways someone could have gotten inside narrows dramatically. And each possibility tells a very different story about who was responsible. 3 ways in. 3 very different suspects. The first possibility, she let them in. Nancy Guthrie opened her door, at some point during that 4-hour window between 9:50 p.m. and 1:47 a.m. for someone she knew, someone she trusted, someone whose presence at her door in the middle of the night did not immediately alarm her. Think about what that means. At 1:44 in the morning, a call came in on Nancy's private cell phone, a number that has been known to investigators since the day her family reported her missing. A private number, not in a public directory, not on a website, shared only with family, close friends, medical providers, people in her immediate personal circle. 3 minutes after that call, the camera was disabled. If she let someone in, it was someone she had reason to trust, someone whose number she recognized on her phone at 1:44 in the morning and picked up for. The second possibility, access without invitation. A key, a code, a familiarity with the home's entry points that no stranger would possess. Someone who had been inside that house before, someone who knew the layout, knew which cameras existed and where they pointed, knew the routines well enough to move through the space without triggering the response a stranger would trigger. All this connects directly to what we know about the entry itself. No hesitation, no second-guessing, no noise that should not have been there. The quiet confidence of someone who had a map in their head long before they arrived. The third possibility, and the one that Dr. Burgess says she has seen before in case history, is the most disturbing of all. Someone was already inside. Already there when Nancy returned from dinner at Annie's house. When Tommaso dropped her off and the garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. already inside. Already waiting. There are cases, Dr. Burgess explains, where the offender enters while the victim is away and waits. Hours, sometimes longer. Studying the routines, learning the movements, timing everything, not rushing, not panicking, because the patience itself is part of the plan. If that is what happened inside that house on the night of February 1st, then what confronted Nancy Guthrie when she came home from an ordinary dinner with her daughter and son-in-law was not someone who arrived after her. It was someone who had been there the whole time. The removal problem. Here is the detail that Dr. Burgess presses on, and that most coverage has not given enough weight. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She used a walker for mobility. Walking to the mailbox could be difficult for her. She was not someone who could be moved quickly or quietly, without significant effort. She did not run. She did not escape. She did not walk away unnoticed. Which means, however she left that house, she did not leave on her own. Someone got her out. And getting an 84-year-old woman who struggles with basic movement out of a home, through a door, into a vehicle, without anyone calling 911 for a disturbance, without a neighbor seeing something that demanded attention, takes either extraordinary planning, extraordinary help, or both. The 911 call that Sheriff Nanos publicly addressed stays in the air here. A woman screaming from inside a car window in the Catalina foothills. Same night, same window of time, same general area. If that was Nancy, conscious, fighting, trying to signal for help from inside a moving vehicle, then someone got her out, moved her, had a vehicle ready, had a route planned. This was not improvised. For a period in this investigation, the mention of Bitcoin, a possible ransom element, gave the case a financial framework, a kidnapping for money, a target chosen for what her family's name could produce, a demand that would translate an 84-year-old woman's disappearance into a financial transaction. It made a certain kind of sense. On the surface, Dr. Burgess looked at it, and then she dismantled it, not carelessly, not dismissively, but piece by piece, with the precision of someone who has spent decades studying how ransom crimes actually behave, and what distinguishes a real financial motive from a staged one. What a real ransom case looks like. Real ransom cases follow a script. Communication, sustained, structured, consistent. Proof of life delivered at intervals, because without proof, there is no leverage, and without leverage, there is no transaction. Escalating pressure. Deadlines. A negotiation rhythm that builds toward an exchange. The kidnapper in a financial case cannot afford silence. Silence is the enemy of the ransom motive. Every day that passes without contact is a day the money gets further away, a day the investigation closes in, a day the leverage erodes. In the Nancy Guthrie case, what investigators and the public have seen is not that script. No sustained communication. No clear proof of life delivered in a structured way. No escalating demands. No negotiation that built toward anything. Just a fragment, a thread that appeared and then did not connect to anything else. A ransom element that surfaced early and then went quiet, in a way that real ransom cases do not go quiet. To Dr. Burgess, that pattern does not look like a financial motive. It looks like a distraction. The staging theory, unless it's staged, she said. And those 4 words change the entire frame. Staging is not random. Staging is intentional deception. It means the person responsible did not just commit a crime. They tried to control how the crime would be perceived. They anticipated the investigation. They understood how law enforcement and the public would respond to a financial motive, and they provided one, deliberately, to send the search in the wrong direction. Oh, think about what that requires. It requires someone who thought not just about the night itself, but about the days after it. The investigation after it. The news coverage after it. Someone who imagined investigators pulling phone records and blockchain trails, and then asked, "What do I want them to find?" And then provided it. That level of thinking does not come from an impulsive offender. That does not come from someone who made a decision in the moment. That comes from someone who planned the aftermath before the act. And that narrows the field dramatically. Because it suggests experience, intelligence, purpose that extends beyond the obvious. If it was staged, then what the ransom fragment is a misdirection. A lane that was laid out intentionally, with patience, with the expectation that investigators would follow it. And the real motive is somewhere else entirely. What was left behind when the financial frame collapsed. When the ransom theory falls apart, what investigators are left with is a crime that does not fit any standard pattern. An unusual victim, elderly, physically vulnerable, unlikely to be chosen for financial extraction. No forced entry, a controlled removal that required either access or inside knowledge or both. Blood inside the home and outside, not enough to immediately determine what happened, but enough to confirm something went wrong. A pacemaker recording 41 minutes of distress and then going silent at 2:28 a.m. A crime that does not look like money. That does not look like random opportunity. That looks, according to Dr. Ann Burgess, like something personal. When a crime does not fit common motives, it often means the motive is not common. Dr. Burgess introduces the possibility that stops the conversation cold. Retaliation, getting even, revenge. Not the kind that fades with time. Not the kind that burns out after a few weeks. The kind that waits. The kind that grows. The kind that has been sitting somewhere for years, patient, focused, calculated, until a moment arrived where it could finally be acted on. You want to go down that line of possible motives, she explains. Retaliation, getting even, awe. And before you dismiss that, before you ask what an 84-year-old woman could possibly have done to provoke something that extreme, Dr. Burgess raises the question that changes everything. What if Nancy Guthrie was never the true target? The message theory. In many crimes driven by revenge, the victim is not always the person who caused the pain. Sometimes, they are simply the closest way to reach it, the most effective way to deliver a message to someone else. Think about Nancy Guthrie's world. She is a mother, a grandmother, a central, beloved figure in a family. And within that family, one name stands out above all others. Her daughter, a high-profile public figure, someone visible, recognizable, accessible, in ways most people are not. Someone whose name is known across the country. Someone who appears on television, who has a public presence, who has spent years in positions that invite attention. And sometimes that attention is not positive. Public figures receive letters, messages, threats, expressions of anger that can seem excessive or irrational on their face. Most of the time, those communications are dismissed, filed, forgotten, written off as the noise that comes with visibility. But what if one of them was not noise? What if someone, somewhere, held on to that anger, nurtured it, allowed it to evolve from frustration into fixation, from fixation into planning, from planning into action? Dr. Burgess references cases where individuals carried resentment for years, sometimes a decade or more, before finally acting. Years of silence, years of watching, years of building toward a single moment, and when that moment arrived, it did not look impulsive. It looked deliberate. If that is the framework for what happened here, then Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is not a crime about Nancy Guthrie. It is a message, directed at someone else, using the person who would cause the greatest pain. Why the elderly parent is the target in a revenge crime. This is the psychology that Dr. Burgess makes explicit, and it is the part of this analysis that needs to be understood clearly. If the goal is money, you choose the wealthiest target, the most accessible target, the one with the least protection. If the goal is fear and pain, you choose the most emotionally significant target. And in many families, that is the elderly parent, the person who represents history, connection, unconditional love, the person whose loss would not just cause grief, but would fundamentally alter the emotional landscape of everyone who loves them. You don't target the strongest point, Dr. Burgess explains. You target the most vulnerable. This is not about logic. This is about psychology. And psychology does not follow the rules we expect, especially when the motive is emotional rather than transactional. Stop right here. We are just past the third part. And what comes in the second half of this video is where Dr. Burgess goes deeper than anything we have covered so far. You are about to hear her analysis of the control dynamic, why the person responsible may already feel they have achieved their objective, why there may be no further escalation, and why that silence is not a sign the investigation has gone cold. It is a sign of exactly the kind of offender Dr. Burgess has profiled before. You are going to hear about legacy cases, what they are, why they matter, and why investigators looking at this case may be going back 10 years or more to find the answer. You are going to hear about the multiple offender theory, and why Dr. Burgess believes that if more than one person was involved, the case may ultimately be broken not by evidence, but by one of them. And you are going to hear what Dr. Burgess believes will ultimately solve this, and why she is confident it will be solved, even if not quickly. Subscribe, so that when something breaks in this case, when a name is charged, when an arrest is made, you are in this room. Like, because Nancy Guthrie's name needs to stay in this conversation. Share, because someone watching this right now may have a piece of this that they do not realize matters. Type subscribed. We keep going. Revenge is an act. a moment, a release, but control. Control is ongoing. And according to Dr. Burgess, what may be driving the person responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is not just revenge. It is control. The difference matters more than it might seem at first. Someone motivated purely by revenge acts, and then it is over. The act is the end point. The emotion is discharged. Whatever they needed to feel, they feel it. And then they try to disappear. But someone motivated by control, they are not finished when the act is done. They are still present, still watching, still engaged. Because what they wanted was not just to act. What they wanted was to watch the reaction. Oh, think about what that looks like in practice. This person, if Dr. Burgess's analysis is correct, has been following this case. Every news report, every update, every moment of public confusion and grief, and unanswered questioning. They know what investigators have released publicly. They know what has been reported. They know where the search has gone and where it has not gone. And they know what they are responsible for. That dynamic, the offender as the hidden audience of their own crime, is not a theoretical construct. It is a behavioral pattern Dr. Burgess has observed in real cases. Offenders who monitor, who revisit, who follow obsessively, and who, in doing so, begin to expose themselves in ways they do not always recognize. Why there has been no escalation. Here is the detail in this case that has puzzled many people following it. No sustained ransom communication. No follow-up contact with the family. No escalation of demands. No movement that suggests an offender pressing for something they have not yet obtained. Just silence. In most crime types, that silence is concerning because it suggests the investigation has no pressure point to work against. No active demand to negotiate around. No ongoing communication that can be traced or timed or used to triangulate a location. But Dr. Burgess offers a different reading. What if the silence is not a sign of failure? What if the objective has already been achieved? If the goal was to create fear, that has happened. If the goal was to cause emotional devastation, that has happened. If the goal was to send a message to someone specific, to make them feel the weight of what was done and understand exactly why, that message has been delivered. Every day the case remains unsolved is another day the message sits in the room. In that framework, the silence is not a sign that the offender has abandoned anything. The silence is the plan working exactly as designed. What this means for the investigation. This psychological profile does something important for investigators. It rules something out. Dr. Burgess says it plainly. This does not feel like the work of a serial offender. Serial offenders leave patterns. They repeat behaviors. They escalate. They create connections between cases that trained investigators can recognize and follow. But if this crime is personal, if it has meaning only to the specific individual who carried it out, and only in relation to a specific target, then there is no pattern to find. There is only this case, only this family, only this act, which means the person responsible may never do anything like this again. Not because they are not capable, but because they do not need to. Their objective has already been fulfilled. All. And that creates one of the most unsettling possibilities in this entire analysis. The person who took Nancy Guthrie may be living what looks like a completely ordinary life. Working, interacting with people, blending in, carrying what they know in silence, watching the investigation from a distance and feeling, in some private part of themselves, that they got away with it. That is the mind Dr. Burgess is describing. And the question is, what breaks it? When a case refuses to move forward, investigators do something that seems counterintuitive. They stop chasing the present, and they start digging into the past. Because in criminal investigations, especially ones that do not make sense on the surface, the answer is often not where you are looking. It is where you have not looked yet. By the time this case reached 72 days, something had become painfully clear. There were no obvious leads left, no suspect actively being followed toward a charge, no single piece of evidence pointing in a definitive direction. And when that happens, the investigation does not stop. It transforms. This is where the methods that pioneers like Dr. Burgess helped build come into play. Because profiling is not just about understanding what happened. It is about understanding who could have done it, even when there is no name, no face, no immediate connection. And sometimes that means stepping away from the crime scene entirely. What a legacy case is, and why it matters here. Legacy cases, Dr. Burgess explains, are past events that share characteristics with the present one. A pattern, a behavior, a method that has appeared before, somewhere else, at another time. Because no matter how unique a crime may seem, human behavior tends to repeat. And if you can find a past case that mirrors the present, you can begin to understand the person behind it. For investigators working the Nancy Guthrie case, this means expanding the search backward. Not just reviewing recent events in Tucson or in Nancy's immediate circle, but asking a much larger question. Where has something like this happened before? Oh, because what makes this case difficult is also what makes it revealing. It is rare, unusual, almost out of place. An elderly woman removed from her home with no forced entry, minimal evidence, no clear financial motive, a ransom element that may have been staged. That combination does not show up often, and when it does, it stands out in exactly the way investigators need to find a comparison. Dr. Burgess points to historical cases that share what she calls the defining characteristic of this one: boldness. The willingness to enter a home, to carry out a plan, in the presence of security cameras and neighbors and evidence collection technology, suggests someone who was not afraid of being caught, or more precisely, someone who had calculated that they would not be caught, someone who believed in their plan enough to execute it with confidence. She references the Lindbergh kidnapping, not for the ransom element, but for the boldness, a crime so audacious it seemed impossible. How could someone enter a home and remove a child while the family was inside? How could someone move through a space that should have been secure? And yet it happened, because the offenders studied, planned, prepared, and moved with the certainty of someone who had already decided they could do this. That same boldness, Dr. Burgess suggests, is present in the Nancy Guthrie case. And boldness like that does not appear from nowhere. It comes from a person who has thought about this before, maybe not rehearsed it in the physical sense, but rehearsed it in their mind, considered it, planned it, returned to it, until the planning became certainty. That process takes time, which brings us to the most significant element of this part of the analysis: the 10-year look back. Brian Entin reacts visibly when Dr. Burgess suggests that investigators may need to go back 10 years or more to find the origin of this crime. I hadn't thought about that, he admits. And that is a meaningful admission from a reporter who has been living inside this case since the first week. But Dr. Burgess is clear. Human behavior is not limited by time. A grudge does not expire. Anger does not disappear because years have passed. Resentment does not fade. It can grow. It can evolve. It can become more focused, more deliberate, more controlled over time, until what began as emotion becomes a plan. Which means investigators looking for the origin of this crime may need to go back further than anyone has gone. Old relationships, forgotten conflicts, long-buried tensions in professional, personal, or public life. Events that seemed insignificant at the time, a strange encounter, an uncomfortable interaction, a moment that felt off but was never reported, a grievance that was dismissed rather than addressed. Any of those could be the seed, and any of those could lead investigators to the person responsible, if someone is willing to look far enough back and follow the thread forward to where it leads. The orbit of connections. Dr. Burgess frames it this way: the key may lie within Nancy Guthrie's orbit, but she defines that orbit broadly. Not just who Nancy knows today, not just who was in her life in the last year or two. The orbit includes everyone who has ever been part of her world, directly or indirectly, recently or long ago. And when you expand the search to include the orbit of the high-profile public figure in Nancy's family, the person whose visibility may be the actual target of this crime, that orbit becomes vast. Letters, messages, online interactions, public engagements over years of a career in front of cameras and audiences. Somewhere in that network, there may be a thread that, when pulled, leads somewhere specific. The question is whether investigators have pulled it far enough back. From the very beginning, something about this case suggested that one person alone may not have been enough. Think through what would be required to carry out what appears to have happened. Entry into the home, undetected or consensual. Control of an 84-year-old woman who, while physically limited, would not have been passive in the face of what was happening to her. Removal from the property, through a door, into a vehicle. Transport along a route that avoided main intersections and surveillance-heavy corridors. Arrival at a specific location that investigators keep returning to, a place that had to have been scouted, identified, and selected in advance. For one person alone, that is an enormous operational load. Physically, logistically, psychologically, Dr. Burgess highlights multiple offenders as one of the few factors that could potentially break this case open. Because when more than one person is involved, the dynamics change entirely. What multiple offenders means for the investigation: each additional person is a variable, a potential point of failure, another human being carrying the weight of what was done. And carrying that weight is not easy. It does not get easier with time. The way most people imagine it, that secrets become easier to keep the longer they are held, is the opposite of the psychological reality. The longer the secret, the heavier it becomes. Because the investigation does not disappear. The media coverage does not stop. The family does not stop speaking publicly. Every new development in the case, every update, every press conference, every video like this one, is a reminder, a nudge, a moment where the person carrying the secret has to consciously decide, again, to keep it. And that repetition is exhausting. Dr. Burgess has seen this pattern before. Offenders who initially feel confident begin to change as months pass. Their behavior shifts. Their routines alter. They become more cautious, or sometimes more reckless, because recklessness can be the release valve for a pressure that has no other outlet. They may follow the case obsessively, monitor every update, revisit the case coverage in ways that expose something about their knowledge or their interest that should not exist. These are the moments investigators are watching for. And when multiple people are involved, every one of those people is a potential version of that moment. Each one will break on the other. Dr. Burgess says this directly. And she is not speaking theoretically. She is drawing from a career of watching exactly this happen. Loyalty in a criminal conspiracy is fragile. Not because people are necessarily bad, but because the pressure that builds inside a shared secret is almost impossible to manage indefinitely. Doubt creeps in. What if the other person talks first? What if they have already said something to someone? What if they are being watched and I do not know it? Those questions do not go away. They compound. And eventually, someone in the group feels the weight more than the others. Someone reaches a point where the psychological cost of keeping the secret exceeds the fear of what disclosure would mean. And in that moment, one word, one small disclosure, one thing said to the wrong person or the right one, can set off a chain reaction that unravels everything. Because every new piece of information leads to another, and another, until the structure that was carefully built collapses under its own weight. This is why Dr. Burgess remains confident. Not just hopeful, confident. This case will be solved. The hair evidence now in the FBI's lab. The 1:44 a.m. call, whose number has been known since day one. The cryptocurrency trail that cannot be erased. The location investigators keep returning to. The route that was mapped before the night it was used. All of that is evidence. But if multiple people were involved, the evidence they carry inside themselves may be the most powerful force in this investigation. Something happened inside that house. Dr. Burgess returns to this phrase more than once, and every time she says it, it lands differently. Because the blood is not nothing, and the way it is distributed, inside the home and outside, tells a story. An incomplete one, still, but a story. Blood inside a home in the context of an abduction typically reflects one of three things: a struggle that preceded the removal, physical harm inflicted before the victim was moved, or, in the scenario Dr. Burgess raises directly, something that happened to Nancy inside the house before she was taken, or while she was being taken. The phrasing she uses is careful. Either she wasn't alive when something happened, or something happened that caused bleeding but was not immediately fatal, and she at least got out. Both possibilities are present in the evidence as it has been publicly described. What is significant is what happened to the blood trail. It stopped. No clear continuous path leading away. No obvious direction of movement from inside the house to outside and beyond. As Dr. Burgess puts it, where does it go? Does it go into a car? Does it follow a path? It just vanished. Blood that stops abruptly often means the transfer point was a vehicle. Someone was moved into a car or a larger vehicle. The vehicle absorbed any continued transfer, and the trail on the ground ends because the trail left the ground, which connects directly to the 911 call. A woman screaming from inside a car window in the Catalina foothills. Same night. Same area. If that was Nancy, conscious, in a vehicle, trying to be heard, then the blood trail ending at a transfer point and the screaming from inside a car are not separate events. They are the same sequence. What Dr. Burgess says about releasing more information. This is where Dr. Burgess makes a recommendation that is both practical and strategically complex. Release more, not everything. Not details that would compromise the prosecution, but strategic pieces. Small, carefully chosen fragments of information that could trigger recognition in someone who has not yet come forward. Because sometimes the public sees what investigators miss. A detail that seems insignificant to law enforcement. A description of a vehicle, a behavior, a time frame, a specific characteristic may be deeply meaningful to someone else. Someone who saw something, someone who heard something, someone whose memory connects a detail from that night to something they have filed away without realizing its relevance. And when that connection is made, it can change everything. The counter-argument, and Dr. Burgess acknowledges it, is that releasing information also gives the offender insight. It tells them what investigators know and what they are missing. And in a case where the person responsible is calculating and patient, that risk is real. So investigators walk a line. Reveal too little, the case stalls. Reveal too much, the offender adapts. Somewhere in between is the balance that could move this forward. The hair evidence now in the FBI's lab is perhaps the purest version of this dilemma. The announcement that hair has been sent for advanced analysis is public. The offender knows investigators have it, but they cannot be certain whose hair it is, whether it is theirs, whether it will survive the extraction process, whether the profile it produces will lead to them. That uncertainty, for someone carrying the weight of this crime, may itself be a form of pressure. If there is one thing Dr. Ann Burgess believes with certainty about this case, it is this: it will be solved, not quickly, not easily, but eventually. And the reason she believes that is rooted not in the physical evidence, not in the hair at the FBI lab, not in the blockchain trail, not in the phone records, but in something far more fundamental. Human nature, how the pressure builds. At the beginning of a crime, the offender has the advantage. They know what happened. They know what they did. Everyone else is trying to catch up. That gap between what the offender knows and what the world knows is the source of their confidence. But as time passes, something shifts. The investigation does not disappear. The coverage does not stop. Savannah Guthrie saying publicly, "We do not need theories anymore, we need answers," is not just a statement of family urgency. It is pressure, real, accumulating, impossible to ignore pressure directed at the person responsible. Every news report is a reminder. Every video like this one, with thousands of people watching, asking questions, holding the name Nancy Guthrie in the public conversation, is a reminder. Every tip line call is a reminder. Every anniversary of the date, every milestone, every public statement from the family is a reminder. And that accumulation of reminders changes a person. Dr. Burgess has watched this happen across decades of studying violent offenders. The initial confidence begins to erode. Behavior shifts. Small mistakes accumulate. Something said in the wrong context. A reaction that does not fit the role being played. A detail known that should not be known. A comment made about the case that reveals too much familiarity with evidence that has not been publicly released. These are the cracks that investigators are looking for, and they find them, not always in the evidence itself, but in the people. The two things that break cases like this. Brian Entin asks Dr. Burgess directly, "What will it take?" Her answer is not new forensic technology. It is not a new witness emerging from nowhere. It is not a single dramatic breakthrough. It is time and pressure. Time erodes the composure required to maintain a secret indefinitely. The longer this case stays in the public eye, and this community is part of keeping it there, the longer the pressure builds on everyone who knows what happened. And pressure finds its outlet eventually. Always. Especially if more than one person was involved. Because the fragility of shared secrets is not a theory. It is a behavioral pattern that has ended more criminal conspiracies than forensic evidence has. One person reaches a point where the weight is too heavy. One person says something. One person makes a mistake. And when that happens, every investigative thread that has been laid carefully in place, the phone records, the blockchain trail, the DNA, the location, the route, all of it snaps together into a case that can be brought to a federal courtroom and proven beyond reasonable doubt. What Dr. Burgess says about the family. There is a section of this conversation that deserves its own moment. Dr. Burgess speaks about the people left behind, not as background to the investigation, but as a central, essential human reality. You don't move on, she says. When a case remains unsolved, it doesn't end. It lingers. Every new piece of information, every rumor, every possibility, all of it becomes something to hold on to. Hope, fear, and uncertainty, all existing at the same time. All. Savannah Guthrie has been a public presence in this investigation since the beginning. Her voice has shifted over the weeks, from the pain of someone standing in the middle of uncertainty to something sharper, something more urgent, something that says, quietly but clearly, "We believe you know more than you have said. We are waiting, and we will not stop waiting." That voice, sustained, public, refusing to let the name fade, is itself a form of pressure on anyone who knows the truth. And it is one of the reasons this case will not go cold. Somewhere right now, someone knows the truth. They know what happened inside that house. They know how Nancy Guthrie was taken. They know why. They know the location she was brought to. They know whose idea it was, whose hands carried it out, and who stood by while it happened. And they are the only ones who can bring this story to an end. Dr. Ann Burgess, the woman who helped shape how the FBI understands violent offenders, who spent decades inside cases that looked impossible and found the human thread that unraveled them, does not believe this case will go forever unsolved. She believes time and pressure will break it. She believes that if multiple people were involved, one of them will eventually reach the point where the weight is too much. She believes that the person responsible, no matter how patient and calculating, cannot eliminate the human element from what they have done. Because the human element is always there. Always. The 1:44 a.m. phone call, the number known since day one, the carrier records subpoenaed, the cell tower data placing that device in the geography of that night, the hair, now in the FBI lab, being processed through technology that a few years ago could not read what it holds and now can, the blockchain trail, the cryptocurrency communications, whose timing suggests coordination, not impulse, digital threads that cannot be erased, the location, the route, the specific place on the map that investigators and experienced reporters keep returning to, because the evidence keeps pointing there. Somewhere in all of that, the name of the person who took Nancy Guthrie is already written. The investigation is not operating like a search that has not found its answer. It is operating like a confirmation that has not yet been spoken out loud. Oh, and when it is, when the silence breaks, when the arrest comes, When the truth is finally said out loud after 72 days and however many more days follow, trace it back. Follow the thread backward. It will lead to a motive that was not about money. It will lead to a level of access and familiarity that cannot come from a stranger. It will lead to a plan that was made long before the night of February 1st. And it will lead to a person who believed, perhaps for years, that they could do this and never face what they did. They were wrong. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Type Nancy to keep her name in this room. Type your country and city. Type Amen for a family still waiting, for the investigators still working, for the truth that is still coming. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please contact the FBI Tucson Field Office at 520-882-7800, the Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line at 5203-514-900, or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. Every piece of information matters. Subscribe and turn on notifications. When this case breaks, when an arrest is made, when a name is charged, you want to be in this room. We are staying on this until Nancy comes home. God bless. I'm Marcus Webb, and if you're new here, subscribe and join us. Like, share, and be part of the family.